How we doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we're back at it breaking down all the latest news and rumblings in Mets land. And did we have some news that broke over this past night? Is that an understatement? It absolutely is. If you guys have not checked out our live stream, please make sure to do so after watching this one, as we live reacted in real time, the first to do it here on YouTube. All you need to know of our initial reaction and analysis to Brandon Nimmo being shipped off away to the Texas Rangers, joining another former Met there and Jacob deGrom, and Marcus Semien, the veteran infielder, stud defender, declining with the bat, but nonetheless still a quality player that the Mets are adding for the 2026 season. We broke it down at great length, but I did also make it known that we're going to get into ultimately what is now next for this Mets team, as they have some massive, big moves ahead that are inevitably going to happen as the fallout of this Brandon Nimmo trade. So let's go ahead and waste absolutely no time by breaking down all the abundance of options that the Mets have when looking at different players, whether it's for the outfield, the infield, potentially the rotation, and so much more, how this all connects to Nimmo being traded, and why David Stearns ultimately made this move. Hit that like and subscribe button on your way in, everybody, as it's a great way to support the platform. Thank you so much for exactly that. Let me know your thoughts and reactions down below, not only to A, the trade that happened between Marcus Semien and Brandon Nimmo, but two, what players do you hope to see the Mets actually land now as a fallout from this Brandon Nimmo trade? Continue to smash those buttons. Thank you guys for helping us get to not only 36,000 subscribers, as we're just a couple hundred subs away, and we're giving away a jersey on the platform to one lucky subscriber once we hit that milestone goal, so make sure you get involved. But also, shout out to our amazing sponsor at SeatGeek that has you covered for all of your ticketing needs. Simply head over there to SeatGeek, everybody, and use my promo code WARDY10. That's WARDY10, link down below, because you're going to get 10% off whatever you need in the ticketing space. Whether that's concert shows, comedy shows, NFL tickets, NBA tickets, UFC tickets, like I did a couple weeks ago there at UFC 322 there at Madison Square Garden, which was electric. Whatever you need in the ticketing space, our awesome friends there at SeatGeek again have you covered. Link down below, Wardy10 for 10% off. Now, as you guys can see beside me, we have a lot of awesome Brandon Nimmo highlights. This especially goes back to the 2024 season. That's what I want to think about when I think of Brandon, not so much 2025, because while Nimmo didn't have drastic difference in offensive numbers from 2024 to 2025, 2024 was a really enjoyable season for the Mets and us fans, and something that we didn't get at all in 2025. But I just want to take a moment further to thank Brandon Nimmo for everything that he did for this Mets organization. You know, Nimmo, for me, this is really one of those that hits hard, considering the fact that he's been a Met pretty much my entire lifetime that I've been a diehard Met fan. You know, I've been a Mets fan my entire life, but I did not lock in on the Mets to the point of watching them religiously and daily up until we got to that 2015 season. I was a little bit more of a late bloomer because I was previously far more interested at the time in football and hockey growing up. Those were just my own interests. I was always a Mets fan, but you wouldn't catch me every single night watching games until that 2015 season. And lo and behold, it's not long after 2015 that we see Brandon Nimmo go ahead and make his debut. Look like he's going to be traded for Jay Bruce. He's not traded for Jay Bruce. He stays in the organization, and slowly but surely he establishes himself more and more each year and becomes one of the best players I've ever seen in my lifetime. I'm so grateful to say that. Nimmo, what I love so much about him isn't just what he did on the field. When we think of his elite defense, when at his best in center field for the Mets for a couple seasons, including the gorgeous robbery of a catch on the Dodgers, Justin Turner trying to hit a bomb off of Mr. Jacob deGrom, doesn't happen thanks to the robbery of Nimmo in center. How fitting that both these guys are teammates now. And it's not just the moments that I think of offensively, including Nimmo's towering go-ahead home run in St. Louis against the Cardinals in that same 2022 season. That was a miraculous comeback, one of the many monster comebacks the Mets had in the first half of that season. A lot of people always think of that Phillies game in Philadelphia right away, down 7 runs to rally all the way back, but I think of that St. Louis game just as much as I do that Phillies game, because they were neck and neck when it came to timing of happening. And two, Nimmo had such a good year that year for the Mets, and that's what ultimately helped lead him to get that monster long-term 8-year contract by Billy Epler, the Mets at the time. Now, ultimately, Brandon Nimmo has been traded for various reasons, and we'll get into that, but I just want to say once more, Brandon, thank you so much for everything that you meant to the New York Mets. You were a prime example on how every player should carry themselves both on and off the field. Unbelievable respect, always charismatic, always positive, always bolting down that first baseline as we see him get overly hyped there for various reasons. When we look at Nimmo, it's a walk. He's getting down the first baseline. It's that easy, or whatever the case may be. Nimmo, thank you so much for everything that you did. We're really going to miss you. We're going to miss your personality. We're going to miss all the great little things that you did to help continue to establish yourself as not only a great player, but an even better human being. I mean, it goes without saying the selfless acts that you constantly did for the fans over the years, and that cannot be understated. So that, and for all the other reasons and then some, simply thank you. We are going to miss you, Brandon. Now, let's get into why the Mets traded Brandon Nimmo, because this is a very important thing to everybody, and there are multiple reasons as to why the Mets trade him, but let's go ahead with the obvious factors as to who they're bringing in, and that obviously is Marcus Semien. Now, Marcus Semien is not a man that's necessarily going to light the world on fire when you look at his numbers from this past season. I'm not here to try to sell you on Marcus Semien having a down offensive 2025 season for a guy who's 35 years of age, not getting any younger, and has already peaked in his career. But what I am here to tell you is the logic behind why this trade happened, and ultimately why big moves are inevitably heading now for this Mets team in more ways than one. But let's start with the obvious, okay? David Stearns has put his foot down on the emphasis that the Mets need to upgrade defense for this team. The Mets in 2025 were 19th in baseball in fielding run value, which is, pardon my French, piss poor. It's not good. They need to upgrade there. And a team that Stearns knows very well and helped build from the ground up, and the Milwaukee Brewers were third best in that same category this past season. And I'm not saying that we need to be the Brewers, because that would mean quick playoff exits because you don't spend the money when you need to, but it's about having that balance of the big spending as well as youth movement when looking at younger, vibrant players that bring a lot of speed and great defense, and also bringing in a solid balance of the veterans as well. You need a lot of things clicking at the same time to have success, and Pat Murphy with the Brewers past couple years as their new manager has done a tremendous job. Hasn't been for a lack of effort there, but the defense has held true. That's something that I not only know David Stearns admires, but wants to build here for the New York Mets. So beyond that, it's another obvious factor. It's saving money. The Mets are saving $30+ million by basically salary dumping Nimmo to the Texas Rangers. Yes, they sent over $5 million, so that way the contracts basically balance out the money right now, at least. But the point is, Semien's going to be off his contract 2 years earlier than Brandon Nimmo, and there's a strong likelihood that the Mets will probably buy out Semien's final couple years of his contract. Does anyone realistically think he's going to be on this team beyond, say, 2 seasons at most? It's hard to envision unless he really looks like a fine wine in a deeper lineup than what he had in Texas getting into the end of his career here. So to be determined on that front. But then you also go back and you have to mention more of the approach for Brandon Nimmo. What do the Mets get by trading away Brandon Nimmo? Not having to worry nearly as much about having too much of a lefty-heavy lineup. Listen, the Mets have been plenty in the market for some key lefty bats this offseason, and if they brought one in while having Nimmo here, they could have themselves a little bit of a conundrum, a little bit of an issue, a little bit of an overlap, because they may have multiple batters batting from the left side that can't defend well, and maybe they don't feel comfortable in rotating multiple options at DH the way that I have been suggesting, depending on the players that they land this offseason. So you also have to think more on that defense for Brandon Nimmo. Of course, that's an obvious one. Not only does he have a bit of a noodle arm in left field, which we've always known. Nimmo's never had a strong arm. That's never been his cup of tea defensively. But what we have known is that his defense has severely lacked the past couple of years, has significantly regressed, especially since he inked that 8-year contract with the Mets a couple years ago. He's entering his age 33 season. There's only going to be more of a liability, more than likely, in that regard, and he just has not been the same player defensively, let's call it how it is, since their plantar fasciitis. Since mid-season of 2024, Brandon Nimmo has not been that same guy, especially. You know, we saw him look tremendous in the first half, near non-existent in the second half because of the plantar fasciitis that he played through, and that carried over to a degree that we saw in 2025. You know, so much so that the Mets were trying to figure out exactly how much reps were they going to give him in left versus if they were going to go down the DH route at all. So you have to wonder, especially with the Mets still in active negotiations for a Pete Alonso reunion, knowing he's going to need more reps at DH, it does make sense why they would be going down that route in the sense of trying to part ways with Nimmo, trying to free up salary and trying to maximize what they have now in Semien, who is a far superior defender than, pardon me, and Jeff McNeil. McNeil's solid, but Semien's elite. He was in the 90th plus percentile in outs above average this past year. He was a Gold Glover in 2025. This guy knows exactly how to handle the middle of the infield without a problem. And you're going to see live in real time the Mets' middle infield defense between Lindor and Semien turn a lot of double plays and look tremendous in doing so. Now, again, I understand Semien comes with a lack of a bat there versus what he had done his first couple years in Texas, his one-and-done year there in Toronto where he just went scorched earth. forth, but I do firmly believe that Semien is going to get back to being more in the 20-plus home run category and a guy to give you at least 85 RBIs next year because he's going to be in such a deeper lineup than what he's been in what's been a regressing offense since they won the World Series a couple years ago and the Texas Rangers. So there's something to be said about power protection around Semien as well as what his role will be here versus what he initially signed in Texas. He signed a massive 7+ year contract there in Texas at $170+ million. You know, obviously, when you sign that big contract, there's lofty expectations. And Semien has struggled yearly to meet said expectations. But now for the Mets, it's not as much about meeting those expectations as it is just being yourself and playing your game. That's what we're expecting with someone like Semien, and that's hopefully what we will be getting moving forward. And, you know, just some food for thought, as of now, Brandon Nimmo isn't even projected to do as well next season statistically than Marcus Semien. Semien is projected to have a higher Fangraphs wins above replacement next season. He's also projected to be right in line with the same offensive approach as the two. Both these guys couldn't hit fastballs well this past season, but Semien, when at his best, can be a hard out. We know Nimmo can be as well when Nimmo is really at his best. I'm sure he will thrive in Texas and at batter's park half the season too with the ball flying there. But the point stands, Semien does bring upside to this team, even if on the forefront on paper, you can't say it's to the same degree as Brandon Nimmo offensively. But when you look at all the underlying numbers, when you look at the expected numbers especially, they really do give you a greater gauge as to how Semien had some poor luck this past season and how he's destined for a nice bounce back in a deeper Mets lineup. And Nimmo naturally will perform well, but is Nimmo going to do anything greater than what he's done previously in his career? That has yet to be seen, and it's hard to believe that at this point in time, knowing he's entering his age 33 season. But the obvious one, everybody, and that's the big takeaway here, is that this was a clear precursor move for the New York Mets to be making bigger moves happen moving forward. And now it begs the question, is this something that the Mets are going to be doing for the sake of adding to their outfield and potentially more? When we look at the rotation, when we look at third base, you know, how exactly does the Brandon Nimmo trade impact the Mets' plans moving forward? It impacts them in various ways. You really think, and I understand some fans do believe this way, but do you rationally believe that David Stearns would go out of his way to trade Brandon Nimmo without at least having somewhat level of an idea as to how he plans to replace him? It just is, it doesn't make any sense as to why the trade would have happened then. You know, even with the Mets shedding that salary, going to have a lot of millions coming back, it just doesn't make sense to trade someone like Nimmo for Semien without having clear eyes set on an upgrade for this offense and defense moving forward. And the big thing that first stands out to me personally is that this opens up the floodgates for Mets top prospect Jet Williams to be further traded. Now, let me make clear, does this mean that I want Jet Williams to be traded? No, that is not what I'm trying to say. I'm just making it known that David Stearns spoke glowingly of Mets top outfield prospect Carson Bench at the GM meetings as a center field option that he could crack the team out of spring training. There was no honorable mention or so of Jet Williams in that regard, who can play center and play second. Had a very good year that we saw this past season, getting all the way up to AAA. Now, why do the Mets not view Jet as highly as Benj? It's because Benj is believed to have more of a profile for Major League Baseball now. And two, that's David Stearns' guy. He drafted Benj in the first round for his first ever pick as president. Jet Williams is part of the old guard, part of the previous regime, something that David Stearns did not have his hands on. And there's something to be said about Stearns, who now only has contracts, you know, up until 2027 or so, of guys that he himself didn't sign on the roster. This is now time for Stearns to really build the team from the farm up the way that he wants to as team president. No matter how much you agree or disagree with that, it's a fact. And in doing so, Jet Williams becomes a hot trade chip for this team. Now, you say to yourself, why would the Mets trade away Jet Williams, who looked like he would potentially be our starting second baseman? Well, you know, it's the same reason as to why we're going to see a lot of moves for the Mets. It's because clearly they're going in a different direction. They need to add to an area of need, and the Mets already have more than enough second base options. They have Ronnie Mauricio, Luis Angel Acuna, Brett Beatty when you play in there, Chad Vigneault, Marcus Semien. Those are 5 MLB caliber for the most part second base options. I didn't even talk about Jet Williams yet, okay? It goes without saying. But if Jet Williams is not traded, then the Mets are going to probably figure out if he's someone who could get time throughout the year if Semien's bat continues to fall off. Is there a role where Marcus Semien can't hit a lick halfway through the season? They call up Jet Williams and they say, you know what, Marcus, we love your defense, but it's so bad offensively for you right now that we can't justify you being loud. Maybe the Mets just eat the money and that's that, because this is far more of this being a Nimmo salary dump than I think it is on the Mets getting a star talent in return. Elite defensively in Semien, but a question mark as we're getting offensively. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think the Mets are going to hold on to Jet Williams for the sake of holding on to him. I think that at the right price, the Mets are going to trade someone like Jet. So you say to yourself, okay, if the Mets are going to trade away someone like Jet Williams, what is a trade that's worthwhile? And a trade that is worthwhile, if you're going to trade away someone as coveted as him, is obviously Tarik Skubal. You know, there's been a lot of rumblings with Skubal and a lot of belief that if this man is traded this offseason, the Mets would naturally have to give up a king's ransom. Something I think most Mets fans, including myself, would like to see. I know there's a contingent that hate the idea of trading prospects for a rental, but I don't care. You have an opportunity now to win. You have an opportunity to add the best pitcher in baseball potentially. If that opportunity is clearly there, go ahead and do it. Make it happen. You have all the assets and then some for it. Jet Williams, at least probably one of Jonathan and or Brandon Sproat, as much as I don't want to see it happen. Then you look at the abundance of other options. Could someone like Brett Beatty be traded and a deal for Tarik Skubal? It's definitely possible. Detroit has shown interest in the past. I know you say to yourself, Wardy, why would the Mets even consider such a thing? And there is valid reason as to why they would. But before I get there, let's just start with the obvious. Tarik Skubal's a game changer. He had roughly 7 WAR this past year. He himself accounted for almost 7 wins. He's a back-to-back American League Cy Young Award winner, one of the best K-to-walk ratios you'll ever see, from 11 plus strikeouts per 9 to 1.5 walks per 9, a 2.2 ERA, touching 100 on the gun, 100 plus strikeouts just with his changeup this year. The guy's insane. He's unbelievably good, and he would take this rotation and this Mets team to another level. Now, put them closer to where they want to be when talking about the best teams in the National League outside of the Dodgers, instead of being a team that didn't even make playoffs this past calendar season. So for the Mets, at the right price, I think Jet Williams is unbelievably expendable now. Not that I want him to be traded, but just that we shouldn't be shocked if he is, because the Mets are clearly showing the signs that they rather roll with a 35 turning 36-year-old second baseman next season and potentially beyond than rolling with their top infield prospect. What does that say about Jet Williams' future with the New York Mets? What it says is, solid chance he's not going to be here for the long haul. Tarik Skubal, absolutely an exception in my opinion to make a trade in a blockbuster type fashion. He not only moves the needle for you, but then you of course can begin extension talks of north of $400 million. I know Scott Boras doesn't love extensions for his rental pitchers, but at the same time, Scott Boras has gotten a prettier penny from Steve Cohen than any other owner in baseball. I think Scott can sit this one out for a second and realize that he's going to get his millions regardless, because Steve Cohen can comfortably spend and give you a big contract where it looks like you got a betting award, but you didn't. It was just lengthy negotiations back and forth that inked him down to say that contract that Skubal wants, which is north of $400 million. Now, you may say that's an insane price. I say I want to win. And Tarik Skubal is the closest thing to help the Mets to get to actually winning in 2026. When evaluating how they can improve their rotation. But as I mentioned, could the Mets have an appetite to trade Brett Beatty away? Yes, they could. And if they do have an appetite to trade someone like Brett Beatty away, they would do it because they would obviously be upgrading the position. And they're going to upgrade if they're going to upgrade the position, look no further than someone who they had a level of interest in the offseason ago. Nothing crazy, but I'm sure would be interested again. And that is, of course, going to be an Alex Bregman. Now, Bregman, another Scott Boras client, was this close to becoming a Detroit Tiger an offseason ago. It didn't happen, however, because he got last minute $40 million average annual value per year on a multi-year contract with the Boston Red Sox. They said, okay, I'm a Red Sox now. I can't say no to that money. Is there a world where the Mets trade Brett Beatty, as good as he was in the second half, to go absolutely balls to the wall crazy, throw a massive bag at Bregman, short-term high AV, and see the Mets can sway him the way that he was swayed by Boston a year ago? Anything, I think, is on the table for the Mets right now. And I'm here to tell you that the Mets were able to trade Nimmo, who had a full no-trade clause. What makes you think that they wouldn't be willing to trade Brett Beatty, who doesn't bring as much current value to them, as much as they like Brett? And again, I like Brett too. I'm not saying we have to trade him by any stretch. I'm just saying if they do trade him, this would be a logical reason as to why. If he was part of a bigger package for a starter like a Skubal, with a Jet Williams among others, and then you add Skubal, you add Bregman, and you're in this full win-now stage while still having an unbelievably deep farm, because even if you trade away north of 5 quality assets to the Tigers, it will not matter. The Mets have one of the best farms in baseball. They can trade multiple top pitching prospects right now, and they wouldn't lose sleep over it because how great they're doing with their player development and their drafting, from guys like what we see in Chris Gross to on the player development side a bit more and Andy Green. They have everything cooking at the moment. So I do have confidence that they can get the best out of their youth movement moving forward, which is what they plan to do. But if they really want to hanker down and focus on we're in a win now stage, Bregman is a pro move that you do. Another move that you can find yourself doing, should you have the appetite and should you have interest, not saying that they need to, just saying that they could do it, is going after and landing Kazuma Akimoto. Because Kazuma Akimoto is, in my opinion, the most polished Japanese player coming over from the MPB this offseason. And the reason why I say that is because he's been consistently sitting right around 25 to 30 plus home runs over the past decade for the Yomiuri Giants in Japan. He's the first player ever in Giants history in Japan to be posted, mind you. His posting window has already started over this past week. That we know there's 45 days for him to negotiate with teams. He can play third base proficiently. He's been a multi-time version of a Gold Glove at the Japanese level in the MPB there. He's been more than fine at first base. He can play left field for you as well, at least league average, if not above league average. A very versatile player who I think could be amazing as someone who's been batting north of 300 on velocity, 93 miles per hour and higher. In contrast, Munetaka Murakami, who's batting right around 100 this season in that same statistic. So you're getting someone who's not only polished, he can handle high velocity, he can handle breaking pitches, he can handle everything. Akimoto looks like he's going to be a really solid, well-rounded player at the major league level. If the Mets are going to have an appetite to trade someone like Brett Baty away, I would argue that Akimoto is another stopgap or shorter-term option for them at third on, say, a 3+ year deal that could really do well for them immediately. Again, guys, I understand the lack of certainty when you go after MPB players, but from everything we know about Akimoto at this point, he's quite literally one of my favorite free agent targets out there in the market. And it's not because of the unknown, as it is what we do know and how quality of a player that he is. Yes, he would be a defensive upgrade already, you could argue, over Brett Baty. And yes, he is fully expected to be a far more balanced bat than what you'd be getting in Baty currently, as much as we like Brett. Again, if Baty's the Mets' third baseman next season, I'm not crying about it. I'm not upset about it. All I'm saying is there's a possibility he might not be. So if it ain't going to be him, who's it going to be? Let's go ahead and talk about it. And fitting that the guy that I'm talking about has an eerily similar swing and follow through to one David Wright. You know, maybe it's a sign. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But beyond that, everybody, there's a lot of other routes, the avenues the Mets can find themselves going down if they're not going to be going after, say, Kazuma Akimoto, Alex Bregman on the third base front. And again, they can go about this in various different ways. But if it ain't going to be them, what does this do? It opens up the floodgates more for a Jeff McNeil trade. Jeff McNeil already looked unbelievably expendable entering this offseason, but now it's like a slam dunk. You know, we got Andy Martino saying he thinks he's going to be on the team for now. We got John Heyman saying the complete opposite. I'm with Heyman on this one through and through. There really is a logical sense for Jeff McNeil to be on this team, okay? I get it, the Mets don't have an outfield right now, but that's not the point. How the offseason starts and how the roster looks is not how the roster looked by the offseason's end. Common sense, but I just got enlightened for those that are unaware. Point is that as much as McNeil has been valued in the organization, he's absolutely another domino that's likely to fall. And there's obvious reasons as to why McNeil is an obvious domino to fall, but he's entering his age 34 season, as we know. Pretty much just has 1 year left on his contract of $15.5 million. Has a 2027 club option, but there's no guarantee whatever team has him at that time is going to opt him in for that season. You know, 11% above league average as a batter this past season. So again, not much of a liability, but the Mets don't need him at this point. That's what we're trying to say here. There really is no logical fit for him should they add an outfielder, which they inevitably are going to do at minimum one. So where's Jeff McNeil going to fit? David Stern's already told the media at GM meetings that he's not going to be getting much reps in the outfield next season. And that's fitting because he's not going to be a New York Mets. So McNeil, if he's traded, what can the Mets get in return? Could they get potentially a quality reliever, maybe with some club control? Could they maybe get a back-end starter? What I do know is that McNeil is pretty much a near certainty to be traded. And when it does happen, I'm really intrigued to see what that move is going to be, because that is not going to be amongst the biggest moves as continued fallout from this Nimmo trade, but it's something to bear in mind because it does feel like a certainty, or close to at least. Now, beyond McNeil, we also have to state that this obviously opens the door for Stearns to stay aggressive in disrupting the core. Could they, again, go out of their way to not only trade Brett Baty? Is this at all a sign that the Mets, again, don't have any sentimental attachment to someone like Pete Alonso? I agree. It doesn't make any sense to trade Nimmo, to not have Alonso return if you do not properly replace these guys. It's hard to envision that if you lose both. One, it's a discussion, but two, it's a lot tougher. So I do not believe Alonso will go away. I hope he doesn't go anywhere, at least, because the Mets really do need him back. But beyond Alonso, everybody, the obvious and the big takeaway here is that clearly the Mets are looking to significantly upgrade their outfield. And in order to do so, they have a lot of different guys to choose from right now. And that's very exciting. Will they go ahead when looking at their options and start by just shooting for the stars? Is this going to lock the Mets fully in to go fully after and do everything in their power to land Kyle Tucker? And what I will say is, to all the fans that said, Wardy, there's no chance the Mets go after Kyle Tucker, we have Brandon Nimmo. Well, folks, Brandon Nimmo's been traded. Now you have a top outfielder that bats from the left side available in the market, who, yeah, is also how much younger than Brandon Nimmo? A lot younger than Brandon Nimmo. He's at least 5 years younger or so than Brandon Nimmo, okay? And he's the best outfielder in the market. He's one of the best outfielders that has hit the market in multiple years. I mean, Kyle Tucker at his best is one of the best purely balanced players in the game. Not only is he proficient defensively, he's elite offensively when he's right. He's a World Series champion. He can hit both sides really well, whether you're facing a righty or lefty, that is. And his one-and-done year in regular league with the Cubs, I mean, he put up very respectable numbers, even for a guy who fell off a cliff in the second half due to injury a little bit that he tried playing through. Doing his best 2024 Brandon Nimmo impression was plantar fasciitis. 22 home runs, 73 RBIs, 25 stolen bags, 266 average, 377 on base, 464 slug, 36% above league average as a batter. There's a lot to love about Tucker. And if you bring in Tucker on a long-term deal, that's more palatable because that is David Stearns' guy. And two, if you brought in Tucker, let's say hypothetically, the Mets brought in Kyle Tucker on at least an 8-year contract, right? An 8-year contract would bring Kyle Tucker to his age 36 season. For context, Brandon Nimmo's only a couple years away from being 36. So when you look at it from that point of view, the Mets have a real opportunity to still get the prime years and the best out of Kyle Tucker for the next 3+ years or so, which is exactly their win-now window. So for Tucker, I don't think we have to do much selling here. He makes a lot of sense now for the team. You could argue that he may make the most sense now, because why would you trade someone like Brandon Nimmo unless you're looking to upgrade with a superstar caliber talent that Kyle Tucker most certainly can be? But Tucker is not where we stop the outfield conversation, because if Kyle Tucker is someone that the Mets, you say to themselves, you know what? As much as we like Kyle, we really don't want to invest that long-term in someone like him currently at his age, and we feel like we could do better elsewhere. Is there anyone available in this market that the Mets could be doing a better job of than someone like Kyle Tucker? Well, there's one player out there that the Mets could be doing a better job of upgrading their outfield for if they're not going to bring in Kyle Tucker. And that one player is, yes, you guessed it, Fernando Tatis. And that's just, yeah, I can't believe we're talking about it. And I apologize for the audio running there for 1 second, everybody. But Fernando Tatis feels like the best fit. He feels like one of, if not the best fit. Now, he's not as realistic, so that's why I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a lock to happen. You got to trade probably Caden's ransom for him, and obviously, he's someone that's on a $300+ million contract, is locked down until 2035, so he himself, obviously, is not going to be a free agent until right around his mid-30s, but again, why are you complaining? If he's a free agent in his age 35, 36 season, that's fine. Tatis, you know, controversies aside, we know how amazing of a player he is. And I understand you don't want to put those controversies aside because they may come back to bite you when you evaluate said player, especially in a big market like New York. It won't be the same as San Diego and chilling at Petco Park. But 25 home runs, 71 RBIs, 32 stolen bags, 268, 368, 446 clip, 6-4 season, 30+% above league average, and the best right fielder in baseball defensively. Nando is amazing. He's someone that can not only slot in right away, that would shift Soto to left. Very interesting dynamic if they do that, going back to their time as Padre players together, how they rekindle that relationship. But Tatis is someone that if the Mets actually asked to get center field reps for, he would be able to handle it above league average as well. So the Mets have a clear opportunity here that they want to really change this core group, but focus both short and long term. Go after someone that's under the same timeline as Soto and age for the most part. Well, no further than his former teammate here in Fernando Tatis Jr., who would do wonders, in my opinion. Not only in this lineup, defensively, he would be a stud. He would shore up the defense, and he does check off those boxes for someone like David Stearns. And he brings moxie. He brings a lot to love about the personality. Yes, it can fluctuate, but I think with Lindor, with Soto, with everyone, this could really be a juggernaut of a team, but hopefully can have success the way that it didn't happen nearly enough with the Padres, because it felt like that they either had some conflicting personalities a bit, didn't round out the roster in other areas. Either way, Fernando Tatis Jr., if he can be had, do not be surprised when you see the Mets heavily involved in his market. The Mets are clearly weighing all outfield options right now, but Nando would be a difference maker. Between him and Kyle Tucker, I would gladly take either. But all right, if the Mets don't go the Nando route, if they can't land a fish to that significance, as much as we would like to see it happen, Then we look at the other options in the outfield, guys that were still very feasible for them right now, but might not be as clear of an upgrade over Nimmo in certain aspects. It depends on what part of the game we're talking about. So let's talk about one who I love, who I've been saying is going to be a Met. I feel like is going to be a Met. I stand by that. I think he's the most likely out of all the players we're discussing today to land with the Mets still, and that's Cody Bellinger. Cody Bellinger, I understand people have concerns on his offense metrics, how they're going to grade out as he gets older. They have concerns how he took advantage of the short porch. Listen, Cody Bellinger would be in a very deep lineup with Soto, hopefully Alonso, Lindor, Simeon, and others. And he would do a great job. And it would not be overly shocking if the Mets pry away the top outfielder that's a free agent from the Yankees in back-to-back years. They did with Soto. Why can't they do it for much lesser on the price point in a Cody Bellinger? Bellinger is exactly what David Stearns is looking for. He's not only a versatile talent, he's an elite defensive talent. This man can play left, can play center, can play right, and can play first, all well above league average. He is an elite defender, so much so that he will not only rob runs for you, but he's someone that should be able to back up the bat by at least being, a little above league average. He's 25% above league average this year. 29 home runs, 98 RBIs. That's a nice way to replace Nimmo's production. 272 average, 334 on base, 480 slug. Even if he falls off a little bit with the power and maybe fluctuates a little bit more at Citi Field, I still have confidence in Cody Bellinger being a very valuable player. Now, I understand the rightful concerns with his home and road splits. He did not look overly great on the road, kind of more in the Brandon Nimmo category. However, Bellinger is multiple years younger. He's like north of 3 years younger, at least, than Nimmo. Now, here's where I understand fans may not love Bellinger. If you bring back Alonso and you add Bellinger to this team, you're looking like an upgrade as is, yes. But if you have to land Bellinger on, say, a 6+ year contract after you just shedded 5 years of Nimmo, is it really as much of a needle mover as you're thinking? Maybe David Stearns thinks that. And I do think that to a degree as well, because I do think that defensive value is so important. It's night and day between Bellinger and Nimmo. It's really not close. That's how good Bellinger is defensively. That's why I'm valuing him so high, because I know the Mets do to a degree. So Bellinger feels like, in my opinion, a seamless fit, because there's a world where, God forbid, if Alonso doesn't return, you could bring in Bellinger and you could still go all the way in on Kyle Tucker if you really want to. By meaning that you could have Bellinger split time from first base to the outfield and let Tucker continue to be your everyday outfielder. And then once Carson Bench is really ready, Mets top outfield prospect, waiting in the wings, then you can have Bench in center, you can have Tucker in right, and you can have Soto in left, or something along those lines. Then you'd have Bellinger more as your first base option, replacing Alonso. Again, when Mets fans complain heading into next season, if they lost Alonso and Nimmo, if it meant you had Cody Bellinger, Kyle Tucker, and Marcus Simeon, I wouldn't be complaining all that much, because the Mets would be 10-fold a better defensive team. But offensively, they would be just as good, if not better, because you think about it, right? Oh, you say to yourself, oh, we can't replace the production, the home run power of Alonso. But you kind of can. If you bring in Bellinger and Tucker, you would absolutely be doing that. And you would be creating one of the deepest lineups in baseball. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm not saying the Mets are going to land both outfielders, but I do feel confident that they will likely land one in the free agent market if they do not land someone via trade. Because there's two more names actually that stand out via trade that I think are potentially feasible fits for this New York Mets team. And one of them is someone who I've loved for years, and that's Byron Buxton. Now, if Byron Buxton happens, it's because of the fact that, and I apologize for the audio running again, everybody, did not mean to do that. If Byron Buxton happens, it's because he went the Brandon Nimmo route. Someone who's been long believed that would not be traded, having a full no-trade clause, reportedly this offseason, may have more of an appetite to waive that should the Twins continue being competent. We all know that's going to happen. They just hired Derek Shelton. So nothing personal, Derek, but come on here. Byron Buxton's coming off of a career year, 35 home runs, 83 RBIs, 24 stolen bags, 264, 327, 551 clip, 5 WAR season, almost 40% above league average. Buxton, as the Mets left fielder and DH, would be amazing. The only issue with Buxton is that Buddy can't stay healthy. He only has a couple 100-plus game seasons under his belt his entire career. So you'd be investing in someone to his 2029 free agency. So you'd have him for 3 years at least, Buxton. That would bring him to his mid-30s. How healthy and available can he be for you? So defensively, he's a stud. We know this. Offensively, he's a stud. He checks off those boxes for Stearns. Base running, electric. I think he'd be even better with the Mets. Point is, though, is that can you bring in Buxton to, A, say, hey, I'll go to the Mets. I'm willing to be traded here. That might be a hard sell to a degree. And 2, how healthy can he be? And that health is so important. I think if the trade does not happen, it's not just because of his lack of interest, but I really do think it's because of the Mets' lack of interest and bringing in someone who's been otherwise made out of paper mache the past couple of years. Nothing personal against Buxton. I love him to death. He's quite literally one of my favorite players in baseball. If the Mets traded and landed Buxton, I would probably freak far more out than any other content creator that you see on YouTube talking about the breaking news that would happen. That's how much I like Buxton. I've been talking about him and potential trades since 2021 here on the platform. So we have definitely we have exhausted constant conversations on the Buxton front and then some. But if the Mets don't trade for someone like Byron, who's a game changer offensively and defensively, it just comes down to health for someone like him. No doubt that he would be a clear upgrade over Nimmo in left and someone who can give you center field reps, but I'd prefer him in left, honestly, Buxton. If bench can handle center or stopgap option can, like a Harrison Bader, like a Luis Robert, someone along those lines, if it ain't going to be Tyrone Taylor. I love Byron Buxton. But if the Mets don't go the Byron Buxton route, there's one other outfielder via trade that could make a level of sense. Is someone who the Mets have been connected to in the past. Haven't really talked about him in a hot minute. Let's go ahead and let's start to pick up the Jarren Duran trade talks, because Duran is not necessarily a guy on paper that looks like a clear upgrade over Nimmo, but currently he's right around the same profile as him when we look at the offensive numbers. 16 home runs, 84 RBIs, 24 stolen bags, 256 average, 332 on base, 442 slug, roughly a 4 WAR season, 11% above league average as a batter. Now, when we look at the defense for Duran, that's where things have changed. In 2024, he was a juggernaut. He was around a 7 WAR player. That's how good defensively Duran was. Amazing. Looking like one of the best young outfield pieces in the game currently. Took a massive step back defensively in 2025. Would he be able to get himself right if he's used the right way by the Mets here should a trade happen? I think it could be had. I think there's a lot to like about Duran, who's under a very team-friendly contract until 2029, entering his age 30 season. I do think I can see the potential on how he would not only be a potential upgrade, but Duran brings a flair, a moxie, and that few attitude that, as much as I love Brandon, he pales in comparison. He doesn't typically bring that. So you're getting more than just the player in Duran, who at his best can play elite defense, be a plus bat for you, a plus base runner, who I think can do wonders on the bags, but someone who does not take any, pardon my French, shit. He doesn't take no nonsense. He ain't that kind of personality. So Jarren Duran, definitely someone that I would not be shocked if the Mets find themselves in the market of, but do I think that the Mets would be doing a great job if they just brought in Duran as an Nimmo replacement, and that be that? I would have liked them to do more there, certainly. I think I would like them to do more. And it's not that Duran's a bad player or that he wouldn't have better success than Nimmo right now, because you could rightfully argue that he would. I want more of a certainty. I really want a superstar talent in that outfield, and Kyle Tucker, Fernando Tatis Jr. are the two glaringly obvious ones that stick out like a sore thumb. So Mets fans, it is up to you guys to let me know what player out of all that we discussed today, if at all, do you think are the most logical fits for the Mets, as they're inevitably going to be making big moves and big splashes moving forward as the fallout continues with the Brandon Nimmo trade. Let me know all your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be on the lookout as we'll have more content either dropping later on today or certainly on Tuesday. Barring changes, I'll be live Tuesday night with Will Salmon of The Athletic, as we're going to have a big show to go over more on what is next for this Mets team and what's going to be a very spicy offseason. We're not even in the winter meetings yet, and the Mets did all this. Tip of the iceberg, folks. Buckle up, get ready. This is going to be a busy, busy offseason. Thank you again, and as always, no matter what, let's go Mets. Peace out, everybody.